Hi, I'm Sarah Cowgill, along with Andrew Moran, Jeff Charles, Jim Fight, and Graham Noble. And this is the Conservative Five, Liberty Nation's online TV news program. On today's episode, Unreliable Sources join the discussion on questionable intentions by the news in casualties of hit-and-run journalism. We'll take a closer look at the elephant in the hallowed halls on the Hill in illegal immigration, a political standoff, and then roll right into the latest salvo lobbed at a potential presidential contender in the Ron DeSantis factor. All this and another rousing bout of brutality on our segment Just for Fun, coming up in this edition of the Conservative Five. Perpetrators and purveyors of fake news have banded together in the run-up to midterm elections. Whether attacking a candidate who has a good chance of winning or stirring up a race war, well, hit-and-run journalism is in full swing in the good old US of A. Sure, people can make mistakes when it comes to reliable sources, especially when the story could be explosive. But are media outlets going with the whole ends justify the means approach? All right, this might be a risky move. But Graham, give us maybe the filtered version of your take on this whole mess.
Well, I think to a certain extent, Sarah, yes, your comment about the ends justifying the means is definitely something that let's call them the left-wing establishment media, that's their philosophy, if you like, what Jeff often refers to as media activists. And certainly, because they are definitely pushing without question for one particular political outcome, one particular ideological outcome. And like most people on the left, they do actually believe that the ends justify the means. Whatever you need to do to achieve your political and cultural goals, that's what you do. And they've never shied away from it. But of course, there's two different types of fake news. There is the intentional fake news, and then I guess what you might call the unintentional fake news. The intentional fake news is what you see mostly a lot of that on social media, coming from just kind of ordinary people or, pundits, political observers, activists, these kind of people. And, let's not pretend that it only happens on the left, because it happens on the right as well. People will go on social media and they'll publish all kinds of outlandish stories. And of course, the reason why those stories survive and make the rounds is because, and we all know this, it's what's called confirmation bias. So many people will just seek out information, statistics, news reports that back up what they believe or what they want to believe is the truth. And of course, let's face it, most people do not do their research, and that's the problem. And that brings us nicely to the other type of fake news, which is the kind of the unintentional fake news, if you like, which is what mostly the establishment media peddles in. And this is because they don't do their due diligence as journalists. They don't do their research. I mean, look at the whole Russia collusion story. That was just such a big story. It was based on almost nothing at all other than gossip and circumstantial evidence. But did these journalists really look into it before they started publishing anything about the Steele dossier and all that? Did they do their research? Did they ask the hard questions? Where are you getting this information? What is the evidence of links between?
Well, did they even care?
Trump's campaign? Well, that's well, there you go, Sarah. Good question, because no, they didn't care entirely, because they saw that story and they thought, wow, this is fantastic. This just makes Trump look like some kind of master criminal. And so we're going to go ahead and run with this. So not only did they not do their research, but perhaps, maybe, I'm speculating here, perhaps they decided, well, we're not going to do the research because otherwise we might find out that this story is based on nothing. So yeah, it's an ongoing problem, fake news, and we're still dealing with it, and it's probably only going to get worse.
Now, just imagine if you got the unfiltered Graham J. Noble view there.
Oh yeah, you wouldn't want that.
Well, that's why we have.
No, you got to look at
we look through it through a different lens, and whether Graham's vernacular fits our narrative is sometimes questionable.
We're missing
Andrew, what do you? Well, Andrew, come on, what's going on? I mean, do Canadian journalists and is this just us? I mean, are we just falling that flat that we just chase anything?
Oh, no, absolutely not. I mean, up here in Canada, we just elected a new conservative leader for the party, Pierre Poilievre, which you can see my article on libertynation.com. And the media's just been pouncing him and attacking him. And just actually, just have it into U.S. news, CBC recently ran a hit piece saying that Ben Shapiro is an extremist and he's attracting all these people and turning them into an extremist. So no, I mean, our news networks here, our newspapers, we lean pretty much left. It's very rare to find a conservative news outlet. So overall, the left it ramps up its attacks on conservatives and anyone right of Justin Trudeau.
To go back to Graham's intro into the subject, do you think that the recent BYU story that went viral everywhere, do you think that was an intentional plant of a story, or do you think there was some validity to it?
See, I was actually going to use that story as an example to call more attention to the gotcha moment thing, which Graham kind of touched on. There is a lot of intentional fake news and, malicious reporting, but there's also just a lot of lazy journalism. So, not looking well into the matter. But also I think sometimes even beyond just the laziness, sometimes you get these situations where people, they see what looks like a gotcha moment and they get real excited and they just can't wait to jump on it. And I think that's what happened with the BYU scandal.
Well, first, I want to say that I feel personally attacked by Graham Noble when he mentions people on the right on social media spreading fake news, because I've been known to post a satirical tweet every now and then, and people will believe that it's true, even if I tell them that it's satire. And that goes to what Graham was saying about confirmation bias. Some of the tweets, now I will admit that it is hard to post satire in 2022 because everything's already so ridiculous, but there is an element of confirmation bias. If I post a satirical tweet against the left, most people will, by now they know, but there's still a good chunk of people that don't get it, that think it's real. And that's the world that we're living in. But I think it's also important to note that when it comes to fake news and the activist media, it's about what they report, but it's also about what they choose not to report. Now, you guys may have heard of about 3 or 4 days ago, there was a man in North Dakota, 41 years old, who ran an 18-year-old over and killed him over a political dispute, for politically motivated reasons. And he confessed to this, that it was political. Local reports reported on it. Conservative outlets reported on it. I just checked before we started this broadcast, and CNN and CBS finally picked the story up, but it happened about 4 days ago. And from what I've seen, no other major mainstream news outlet has picked up on the story. Now, we all would know what would happen if the party affiliations were reversed, right? I mean, Biden just gave a speech labeling Republicans as extremists, and the guy that killed this other guy said that he did so because he was part of a Republican extremist group. We know what would have happened if that were Trump and the situation were reversed. They would have blown that up 5 minutes after it happened. So that's another way in which the activist media promotes false narratives.
I think it's also important to point out too that fake news can just consist of the act of being stenographers for the federal government. I mean, all this whole fake news and typing of the government says it's nothing new. I mean, the incubator baby story in Iraq during the 1990s. You had the WMDs in Iraq. So journalism also classifies just pretty much what the government says. A lot of people say, "Oh, just report on the facts and what's being said," but you do that, you also risk the risk of just being a propaganda outlet for the federal government. And one more thing too, I would like to say, I was going to mention about Ron Paul. If you talk about fake news, you go back to 2008 and the constant attacks against Ron Paul and his supporters by Fox News, CNN, CBS, all those networks, they just completely hammered him and his supporters. I remember there's one segment on CBS, there was a straw poll and Ron Paul came in second. It was a huge thing. And the whole press was talking about, oh, look who came in fifth, Doug Gilmore or Governor Gilmore. What? Wow. But completely ignoring what Ron Paul, that he was in second place, that thing. I think it was Jon Stewart. He called him the 13th floor of U.S. politics. So I think fake news is nothing new. It's been around for a long, long time.
Well, and also we have to remember that unfortunately, there are certain individuals, just, for want of a better term, regular people. They're not always regular people, though. Sometimes they're celebrities who have malicious intent, and they'll start a fake news story either for publicity reasons, but also to try to score political points, try to make the people who they don't agree with politically out to be the bad guys. I mean, for instance, coming back to the BYU story, who actually started that? Who was the originator of that story? It was a woman who is well known for being very kind of politically vocal, and also I would go so far as to say Guilt has a documented history of some very racist, i.e. anti-white social media posts. And then, look at our dear friend Jussie Smollett, same thing there. I mean, he created that hoax in Chicago with apparently the fanatical Trump supporters roaming, the streets of Chicago at 2:00 in the morning, who of course were big Empire fans. So they recognized Jussie Smollett immediately. And, but he created that. He planned that. He created it. And okay, a lot of people say, well, he was doing it for publicity reasons to give his career a kind of to try to restart his failing career.
We could go on and on and on and on. We could make a 2-hour show out of this.
There's a malicious element to it is basically the bottom line there. Yeah.
But we got to go. We got to wrap it up. The lack of responsible reporting from broadcasters being too quick to render judgment based on feelings, to outlets seeking only sources that will fit their chosen narrative. I mean, how is the real truth getting to the American public? Thanks, panel. Check your sources, please, and thank you. Swamp-sitting Republicans and Democrats seem to have forgotten there's a massive human crisis on the southern border with Mexico. Projected illegal crossings for this year are around 2 million, give or take a few, and border states have just about reached the end of their road. Democrats claim there is no crisis. Republicans haven't done much in the way of holding the Biden feet to the fire. And it seems the only proactive immigration plans are being implemented by the governors of those border states. Jeff, you're hanging around in those border state regions a lot these days. Does DC have a clue about the border situation?
Yes, of course they do, Sarah. At first, when this whole thing first started, I wanted to give them the benefit of the doubt, because maybe Biden's team was just brain dead and they didn't realize that their rhetoric and rescinding all of Trump's policies were going to invite more people to the southern border. But fast forward to now, and we see that the situation is getting worse and they're still not doing anything about it. Biden hasn't even been to the border. No, this is by design. So of course they know what's going on. They just don't care. So enter the Abbott Express, enter DeSantis Air. That's why this is going on, because the White House isn't going to do anything about this until they actually get pressure. And they can't just come from the right. It has to come from Democrats themselves. And you and I have talked about this, Sarah. That's the whole reason why they're pulling this. And it is a stunt, but that's the reason why they're pulling this political stunt, because this administration, they don't care about all the fentanyl deaths that have resulted from this. They don't care about the fact that migrants are dying on the way over here. They are staying the course. This is part of their plan. So the only way they'll change course is if there's enough pressure applied.
So do we hope the survivors vote Democrat? Is that what the point is? I don't get the point of any of this, and why we don't have any kind of immigration. We have immigration laws in place, but nobody seems to want to follow them. And, Graham wrote a great piece this week on the invasion at Martha's Vineyard of 50 people. So I'm going to throw it to Graham right now. What do you got, Graham?
Well, of course, the first thing you got to say about that is that, DeSantis, I mean, he is now the king troll. I mean, nobody has ever trolled the Democrats harder on immigration than to actually gather 50 illegal immigrants and fly them to Martha's Vineyard, of all places. And I want to say very quickly that just in case there's anybody in Martha's Vineyard right now who's when they watch this show, maybe over brunch or whatever they do up there, I need to apologize to some of you, because in my article I made it out to as if like everybody who lived in Martha's Vineyard is just a despicable hypocrite. And I've actually heard that since the whole incident with the Florida 50, as I call them, that some people in Martha's Vineyard have actually spoken out, kind of defending what DeSantis did, and thought that he really kind of shone a spotlight on a certain problem. And that problem is the hypocrisy of people who say that they welcome illegal immigrants, illegal aliens with open arms, and they are sanctuary cities, but suddenly they're not actually interested in providing sanctuary when those people show up on their doorsteps. And to me, it was just a masterstroke to do that with Martha's Vineyard, because, you can fly them into DC, you can fly them into Delaware, whatever. Nobody really takes any notice of that, especially into some huge, massive city like New York. Like 12 million people live there. Who cares if a few hundred immigrants, illegal aliens, I hate to keep calling them immigrants, illegal aliens. I'm an immigrant. When illegal immigrants show up, nobody cares. They've just washed away in the mass of humanity. But when they show up somewhere like Martha's Vineyard, that really shines a spotlight. And it was a masterstroke. I thought so.
But Graham, there's a housing crisis going on in Martha's Vineyard. Those 50 people are out to buy $6 million properties. You have to care for those people. They clothe them and fed them for one day and then kick them out 24 hours later. So my heart goes to the people at Martha's Vineyard.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, but the question is, Jim, is it working? Is it working?
I don't know if it's working yet, but it's definitely getting a response. I mean, you asked earlier if the people in the swamp actually were aware of this. Well, I mean, if they weren't, they're definitely getting the hint now. I'll tell you one thing: it is very successfully cracking us up, though. This whole, like Graham said, Martha's Vineyard, that was a masterstroke. That was. Wow.
I have a question for Jeff, because Jeff is really in tune with a lot of polling and election polling. Do these type of issues, result in any meaningful change in the ballot box? Will somebody go to the ballot box and say, hey, that Martha's Vineyard's not really shine a light into illegal immigration? What do polls tell you, Jeff, about immigration and much of factors?
Yeah, I don't think they'll do so consciously, but this is making an impression. And most people are on board with it. And it's funny, Politico came out with a piece saying that this is going to damage DeSantis with Hispanic voters. And then Politico published another poll showing that most Hispanic voters agree with what these people are doing. I mean, and to Jim's point, there has to be a breaking point, right? And both Abbott and DeSantis have said that they are not going to stop. They're going to ramp this thing up, which is the only way to make this work. It can't just be a short-lived stunt. I mean, Abbott just sent another couple busloads to Vice President Kamala Harris's house a few days ago. So this is going to keep going on, and if they really want this to work, they're going to have to expand it to other cities. They need to get into California and to others to really make an impression. But right now, it seems like it will eventually get to the point where Democrats are going to get tired of it. And like Sarah said, when we talk on LNTV, to go through the back channels, because they're not going to do this publicly, but go through back channels to pressure the administration to finally do something about this.
And I think largely, it really is a total myth that all the Hispanics, Latinos, however you want to term them, I believe the more correct term is Latinos, but the idea that the Latino community in the United States is all about rights for illegal aliens and letting them in and giving them this, that, and the next thing. It's not true at all. I mean, I used to live in New Mexico, and I had a lot of Latino friends, and they used to, even back then, this was many years ago, and they were horrified, even back then, at the illegal immigration problem, and they were disgusted that people were allowed to come in here undocumented and just walk across the border and then get whatever kind of assistance they were getting. Horrified. And so it's always been a myth. There is no there is no huge, I mean, for a start, the Latino community in this country is very diverse. As diverse as what is it? Breakfast tacos or something, according to Dr. Jill Biden. Maybe some of them, there are activist groups, of course, that are pro immigrants' rights, let's call it that. But a lot of them are not into that at all. They came into this country, many of them legally. they worked very hard, or even if their grandparents or great-grandparents actually did come here illegally, they have established themselves legally in this country. They consider themselves Americans. They work very hard. They're not interested in a bunch of people walking across the border.
No, I mean, they did it the right way. In red states, especially in the farming communities, we have seasonal workers here all the time. Nobody looks twice at them, as anything other than, well, they're here to work for Green Giant or whatever. And they come in, they spend a season, they have visas to do that. Some of them actually apply and stay. And if the farm, usually it's the farmers or the people who are the ranchers and farmers, they, apply with them to sponsor them and give them, a good place and a good place to stay so that people aren't worried about it. But, when they just come across the border and nobody knows what's going on anywhere and nobody can keep track of them or know where their kids are, I mean, it's a mess. And I just don't understand how we have gotten this far without a complete explosion down south.
Yeah. And if we want to talk about human trafficking, let's talk about human trafficking, which is actually going on down there at the border and across the border in Mexico and certain other Central American countries. Let's talk about that, because that's the real human trafficking catastrophe, not 50 Venezuelans getting a free flight to one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in the country.
Yeah, unfortunately, Democrats would rather downplay the experience of actual victims of human trafficking and modern-day slavery and sex trafficking to score a few cheap political points against DeSantis. It's absolutely disgusting.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed. Well, it doesn't look as if the Abbott Express is stopping service anytime soon to those bastions of blue. And really, most folks have to admit, it highlights the hypocrisy of those virtue signaling sanctuary city status states. Ron DeSantis is the heir apparent. Well, at least according to the left biased media. How else could you possibly explain full frontal attacks on a man who is yet to declare whether he'll run for president? Perhaps the media has declared Trump DOA and have shifted focus to the good governor of Florida. You're down there. What do you say, Sir Charles? What's going on?
Well, I mean, like I've said before, these days, every night before Democrats go to sleep, they check under their beds to make sure DeSantis or Trump isn't down there to get them. But they are afraid of DeSantis. And I've written about this in the past. I do think that even though they're trying to make sure that Trump doesn't run, there are at least some Democrats who view DeSantis as a bigger threat. And I tend to agree, because DeSantis, like I've always said, he has a lot of Trump's strengths and none of his weaknesses. He doesn't have the same type of baggage. He doesn't get into silly Twitter feuds. He doesn't have an indictment looming against him after the midterms. He doesn't have the FBI searching his home, at least not yet. But DeSantis is a more politically savvy version of Trump. I mean, I heard somebody else say that, when Trump came into office, he had to learn how to use the leverage of government to get his agenda across because he wasn't a politician. But DeSantis has been in Congress. He's been governor. He knows how the swamp works. So I do think that they are more afraid of DeSantis, because DeSantis at some point is going to run for president, whether he does so in 2024 or in 2028. I think if Trump does decide to throw his hat in the ring, DeSantis probably won't. But again, we don't know what's going to happen with Trump. We don't know whether he's DOA or not. I mean, right now it's looking kind of precarious, but we don't know what they're going to come out with after the midterms. So I think at this point, they are looking more at DeSantis for that reason, because they think that there is a chance that they may be able to push Trump into not running.
Graham wants to piggyback on that. What do you got, Graham?
Well, yeah, no, I don't disagree with what Jeff is saying, but I also think there's another factor at play here. And I almost think the whole thing, because let's face it, if Trump really was as incompetent, corrupt, dishonest, and all the other things that the left-wing media and left-wing activists and Democrats have been saying about him all these years, then surely they would want him to run again, because he's like the most vulnerable presidential candidate ever. You'd think they'd almost be encouraging, almost begging him to run again, because it would be so easy for them to defeat him, apparently. So, you have to ask the question, well, why do they still hate and or fear Trump. And I think a lot of it is that, the people on the left are very emotional. And I think it's almost got to the point where this is, it's symbolic. They've hated, Orange Man bads. They've promoted this now for so many years, that I believe if Trump were to actually officially announce that he's running again, and then he were to win the Republican nomination, which I think he would if he ran again, and then he were to become president again, it would be the ultimate kick in the teeth to the left. They would just hate the fact that this man is back again in the White House. And so I think more than anything else now, it's become emotional with them that they're now focusing on DeSantis because they want to hope and they want to convince everyone else that, okay, Trump's done. We've vanquished him and he is gone. And I believe that's what they're kind of hoping.
I also think, too, that they remember that they underestimated Trump in 2016. They're not trying to make that mistake again.
I mean, isn't the whole goal to discredit or to, slap some kind of felony on him so that he's ineligible to run? I mean, that seems to be their game plan. I mean, are they going to try to take two giant, important, powerful Republicans out at the same time? That seems kind of foolhardy. I don't see how they can do either one of them.
Well, here's the question. If they do manage to hit Trump with a criminal charge, can he still run for president? There's nothing in the Constitution says he can't.
He has to be convicted, I think.
That's something that we might have to one day pick the brains of our legal expert, Scott D. Cosenza Esquire.
Yeah, he's around somewhere. We can always
he's probably lurking in the background somewhere. But even if he was indicted and convicted of something, would that actually prevent him? Is he then ineligible to run for president? I'm not really sure. I may be wrong, but I personally think that doesn't disqualify him from running for president.
The media's MO is that no matter who the Republican Party nominee is, that person is always worse than Hitler. It's always the worst thing to ever happen in United States politics. When Mitt Romney ran for president, he was literally Hitler in 2012. Donald Trump was literally Hitler. I'm waiting for someone else to say that Ron DeSantis is the next Weimar Republic dictator. So every GOP nominee always has this negative image. Look at Joe Biden. He said that if Mitt Romney was elected president, he put all black people back in chains, put y'all back in chains, when all that happens. So no matter who it is, that GOP nominee is going to be the next Hitler, next Mussolini, next Mao Zedong. Well, not Mao Zedong because the mini Maos and the establishment love communism, but overall, they're all the next, worst thing in the world.
Well, there won't be any more literally Hitlers because that Trump was the last one, right? So now it's Trump 2.0. That's the new term.
So
you've got Trump worse than Hitler.
Yes, literally Hitler 2.0.
Literally Hitler 2.0.
You've got Trump worse than Hitler.
How far can we go with this?
So you gotta progress it. You gotta progress it, or it's just going to be stale. So now that's why DeSantis is Trump 2.0. He's Trump, but worse.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah.
Or Trump, but better, according to I think wasn't that what you said, Jeff? He's got all the Trump national.
Yeah,
national America First qualities and none of
and the thing about it is that the base would support either with the same amount of fervor. I mean, if Trump runs, the base is going to support him. If it's DeSantis, they'll support him passionately too, because they love DeSantis and they love Trump.
Also on the left, you've got a lot of wishful thinking and affirmations. I mean, there's an old saying, nobody loves what they fear. And, I think a lot of this, trying to discredit Trump and taking on DeSantis, and now DeSantis is going to be the new Trump. I think a lot of that's just wishful thinking.
I think Trump's going to be the kingmaker, though. This is the way I look at it. Okay, is that Trump and DeSantis get on perfectly well, and I'm quite sure that if, say, I can't, personally can't imagine Trump actually coming out and saying, okay, I've decided against running for president again, although that's possible. But let's say that Trump doesn't run and DeSantis does. I believe that Trump will give DeSantis his full backing. And I think Trump needs to bring his star power, if you like, would need to bring his star power fully into the spotlight in support of DeSantis. And I believe that, because Trump still stirs up a lot of emotion amongst conservatives. I mean, they have these, vehicle convoys and yacht, boat flotillas and all this kind of stuff. They were so emotional about supporting Trump that DeSantis, I believe, would, despite the fact that he's got a great record and he's very savvy and all the rest of it, I think he would need that. I think he would need Trump to channel all that emotion that his supporters had for him, for Trump. He would need to channel that and kind of project it onto DeSantis. And I believe he would try to do that. And I think if he did, DeSantis would have a very good chance of winning.
DeSantis is very on the national stage at this point. And so wherever he's going to go is going to be amazing. And I just don't know where that's going to be. But, he's taken on Disney. That got him national attention. He's flying people to Martha's Vineyard. That got him national attention. He's kind of grabbed on the coattails of other good public relations when it comes to the conservative movement. Now, if Trump was not to run, but back DeSantis, there will be stadium-filled rallies all over this country. And so that could be the biggest power shift that we're going to see in a while. He could actually make that big of a dent.
And going on from that, I think DeSantis also, you're right, he has become now, he's on the national stage firmly. And I think he also should maybe send a little thank you note to the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, because, how many Democrat voters in California really knew much about DeSantis or really cared much about him, or Florida, which I'm sure they look upon Florida as the poor man's California. How many of them really cared? But then, Gavin Newsom decided to pick this fight with DeSantis. And that's, that kind of made that brought DeSantis's name to the West Coast as well. So little box of chocolates or something, or maybe a little present of some new hair gel or something that DeSantis should maybe send to Mr. Newsom there.
Yeah, it's the dumbest thing Newsom could have done. He's making himself look like he's obsessed with DeSantis. He channels him to a debate last week. I'm like, well, you are using DeSantis to raise your star. How does that make you look that you can't do it on your own?
That's something that Sarah said before. Also, if you want to add another list of achievements, he declared war on the ECG investing industry. So he's going after Wall Street. So I think that's another notch under his belt there.
Yeah, but you got to get that word out there, and they're only going to focus on the bad because we know how that works. Oh boy. Well, we got to go. Is Ron DeSantis just a clone of Donald Trump? Seems to be the picture the activist media wants to paint. But we here at Liberty Nation, we'll let you, the American people, decide for yourselves. Thanks, panel. Well, folks, it seems we are in for a surprise. Question is, will it be pleasant? Mr. Moran, what have you cooked up for us today on Just for Fun?
Hello, I am your host, Andrew Moran, and please welcome to the debut of a new game show that makes you ask, huh? What? In other words, it's called the Joe Biden Spectacular. The rules are simple. We give you a quote and you pick one of two people, person A or person B. If you get stuck, you can seek a lifeline from yours truly, who will do an impersonation of that individual's voice. But before we get to some festivities, just a few developments in the news. Households are still baffled by their utility bills despite falling energy prices. A couple was in the press the other day because they opened their electricity bill and water bill, and they were shocked by the amount. But in all seriousness, folks, President Joe Biden is dismayed 1 year later that Afghanistan is in shambles. Truly, he is. The word is that he and his team are negotiating with the Taliban on devising a constitution. Reportedly, Biden wants to give the Taliban the U.S. Constitution, telling them, hey, we don't seem to be using it anymore, so you can have it. And finally, President Biden made it in the news because he missed the tax filing deadline. Truly, it turns out that he was sleeping so long that he forgot. But he is catching up now, and word is that he is listing the economy as a liability on his tax return, so he gets to write it off. So now let's get to the fun and games of the Joe Biden spectacular. Since we at Liberty Nation are a chivalrous bunch, we shall start with none other than sassy Sarah Cowgill. Sarah, when discussing the diversity in his state, who said this? Quote, "You cannot go to a 7-Eleven or Dunkin' Donuts unless you have a slight Indian accent." Huh? Was this President Joe Biden or Senator Lindsey Graham?
President Joe Biden.
The answer is President Joe Biden. Ding, 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 ding. He was speaking to an Indian voter back in 2008 during a visit to Delaware, and he was saying his community was quite diverse.
You cannot go to a 7-Eleven or a Dunkin' Donuts unless you have a slight Indian accent.
They all work at 7-Eleven for some reason.
Dang,
and for that, Sarah gets to win the 2016 Red Sox hat. There you go. So, Jeff, now, when discussing inflation, who said this? Inflation might still be transitory. What in cream and an ice cream sandwich? Who said this? Was this Minneapolis Fed Bank President Neil Kashkari or Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez?
Ooh.
Go for a lifeline.
I'm going to go with Minneapolis because AOC probably doesn't know what transitory means.
Well, yes, but...
That's exactly what I was thinking, Jeff. That would have been my exact answer to that question.
Well, the answer is Neil Kashkari. What AOC actually said was, why can't Joe Biden just cancel inflation? Graham, next. When explaining the Democrats' failure to achieve results, who said this? It's time for us to do what we have been doing. And that time is every day. Huh? What? Was this House Speaker Nancy Pelosi or Vice President Kamala Harris?
That was, without doubt, Vice President Kamala Harris.
It is time for us to do what we have been doing, and that time is every day.
She has this wonderful way of picking her favorite word of the day and then using that word about 10 times in the space of 30 seconds. And it's wonderful.
No, you're right.
And correct. That is the correct answer. Vice President Kamala Harris. This whole panel is excellent. I love you guys. Now, James, when talking about God knows what, who said this? There's an old saying in Tennessee. I know it's in Texas, but in Tennessee that says, fool me once, shame on you. You fool me, can't fool me again. Was this former Vice President Dan Quayle or former President George W. Bush?
Oh man, you know what? I want to hear the impersonation. Let's go.
Lifeline it.
Yep.
There's an old saying in Tennessee that I know it's in Texas, probably in Tennessee, that says, "You fool me once, shame on you. Fool me, you fool me, you can't fool me again."
That was George. That was Bush after listening to too much of The Who.
There's an old saying in Tennessee, I know it's in Texas, probably in Tennessee, that says, "Fool me once, shame on you. You fool me, we can't get fooled again."
And that is correct. It was former.
And I knew the
President
answer,
George
but I still
W.
wanted to hear your impersonation.
I mean, can we
wanna
just
hear
agree that
Andrew's
Kamala
impression
Harris
of
is a
every
black
person
female
he-
version of George W. Bush?
There's just
And
a lot
this
of
last
saying
one-
the same thing with absolutely no news in it.
And this last one is for the entire panel. Who famously said this? China. Who said this? And no guesses. No guesses.
China. Trump.
China now. You know, China.
Well, there's it. Correct. Sarah. So Sarah got it. So it's actually Sarah Cowgill got two answers of these questions correct. So congratulations, Sarah Cowgill, on being our winner.
I win.
And that's
I get the hat.
for us today.
That's
folks.
it. You get the used hat.
But before we leave, we would like to pay tribute to the brave leftist millionaires and billionaires at Martha's Vineyard. We understand this was a humanitarian crisis that paled in comparison to what occurred in Haiti, Venezuela, or Sudan. We can only offer our thoughts and prayers to the generous, kind-hearted folks who offered food and clothing one day and then kicked them out the next day. Godspeed, friends. Godspeed.
Okay. That wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. But, I can't even. I'm not sure anything else can be said. Thanks for hanging tough with the C5 today. Thanks, panel, and Andrew. That's it for our Conservative 5 panel today. Check out our other C5 shows and segments on your favorite video platform. YouTube, Vimeo, Rumble, we're on them all. As well, Liberty Nation has its own Roku channel where you can see all of our TV productions. Thanks for tuning in, and remember to surf on over to libertynation.com. Join us on the Member Zone, just $17.76 for the whole year. Special thanks to our fantastic editor and post coordinator, Frank Diorio. I'm Sarah Cowgill, filling in for Lisa K. Donner. Thanks for joining us today. This has been a production of libertynation.com, where truth is making a comeback.